What's up, all you vampire hunting dudes and dudettes? Toyshiz here, and I'm back yet again to give you guys another fresh look, this time courtesy of my friends over at Diamond Select, and we're going to be checking out their brand new figures based off the Netflix TV series, based off the old Konami video game series, Castlevania. And they have 3 new figures out, but today we're just going to be checking out Trevor Belmont. And I remember when these were announced, I immediately went like, oh man, I gotta have like the main. I hope they make Dracula, I hope they make Belmont, and sure enough, yes, they will be having a wave 2 as well, but Dracula looks really good on the packaging. Trevor looks really good inside the packaging. I'm excited for these figures just from playing the old video games in Nintendo and Game Boy and Super Nintendo and everything else. The side of the box, the back of the box, everything always looks good. Diamond Select uses that big packaging, of course, and just FYI, just depending on where you buy these figures from, you may see a smaller packaging at stores like GameStop, but they are the same figures through and through. And here's the bio if you want to go ahead and screen grab that. And these were designed by Eamon O'Donoghue and sculpted by Richard Force, and they've done a ton of figures recently, including the Avatar figures, which I recently looked at. But let's go ahead and let's open them up. This is the brand new Diamond Select Netflix series Castlevania Trevor Belmont action figure. And here's old Belmont out of the packaging, and as you can see, he comes with a ton of weapons and extra hands. In fact, it's kind of funny, I think the only other figure as of right now that rivals him is the most recent Marvel Legends Shang-Chi figure. I mean, he's got hands for days, open, closed, all that. He's got weapons, he's got his chain, and the whip, which I'm really stoked that they included those. And I think that Richard and Eamon really did a good job of capturing that anime look. It's not always easy to translate 2D animation into a 3D model, but I think they did a great job. The original press photos did show Trevor having his shawl coat sort of deal from season 1, but sadly it's not in the packaging. He comes with a long sword and a short sword, both of which are really sculpted nicely, really painted nicely, and they both respectively slip into each of their sheaths, with the longer sword having a ring on it, which looks like you could kind of attach it somewhere, but we'll check that out in just a second. He comes with his chain whip, his standard whip. Both are really good. I would have loved to have seen bendy wire for these things, but they are sadly just plastic. You can kind of unravel them for the most part, but they will eventually slink back to their original forms. And the best accessory so far for 2020 goes to this Trevor Belmont figure. He comes with a bucket. It's not a magic bucket. It's not anything other than just a bucket. It's a well-painted bucket, and I just think that that is hilarious. Accessory of the year so far. The multiple hands, he's got some daggers which he holds through his hands. He's also got an open set of hands, which look really good. All the hands are sculpted nicely. He's got some, I'll say, hand-shaking hands, something like that. Then he also comes with a pair of dagger-holding hands. They're painted nicely, they're sculpted nicely, and they hold it right between the thumb and the forefinger. And then he also comes with a pair of dagger-holding hands, and they're painted nicely, they're sculpted nicely. He holds it right between his thumb and his forefinger. Wait a minute. Did he just come with the same set of hands twice? Because this is it for hands, and he doesn't have any weapon-holding hands. Well, I think what happened is that for both hands, they put the dagger in between. And for the one that he's supposed to hold the weapons with, the factory accidentally put a dagger in there. So what you're going to have to do is, unfortunately, you put a little bit of pressure on the hands that are the main weapon holding hands, not the ones with the thumbs and everything else. You'll know the difference, as you can see in the photo, and you simply just give it a good tug and you can pull the dagger out pretty much easy peasy. One of the hands kind of took a little bit of paint with it, but for the most part they came right out. So it's something you're going to have to amend yourself, or else you are not going to have any weapon holding hands, and that is a huge problem, but it seems to be more of a factory error than anything. And much like any figure with swappable hands, just go easy. They do have a longer peg. You will still see some shredding of the flesh on the peg itself. Shouldn't be any problem for the actual hands. You might have some issues where they're a little bit looser on some hands, especially for mine with these more dagger holding hands. So it's going to depend on which figure you get. And some of the paint can be a little sloppy from here to there, depending on which hands you want. But thank God for those open hands that you just created yourself, because they definitely hold the weapons perfectly. And you can see that the shorter sword handle is a little bit too big for his grip, so it'll expand it just a little bit. But the longer sword does fit in his hand really nicely. And again, both the swords look good. On the longer sword's sheath, you do have that ring, but there's really no place to attach it. You can kind of finagle stuff. Nothing looks good. It's almost as if they didn't include something, and this doesn't really work. And go easy on this. You don't want to break the actual ring off, and it doesn't really fit. So if anything, you'll be forcing it. The whip itself, the original whip, looks really good. Just make sure to tie it well, or else it'll unravel itself. It doesn't really go in the other belt loop. In fact, I don't know what is actually supposed to go in the other belt loop, but with those weapon holding hands, he holds both the chain whip and his standard whip really nicely, and that's what it's all about. This is the core Castlevania look, and I'm glad that he comes with both accessories. But let's go ahead and look at the articulation on this Trevor Belmont. His head will go back and forth, up, not so much, because his hair is going to get in the way, and also his collar is high as well, but he can look down minimally, I would say. Basically, to and fro. They ain't going to go much either way, and it's a little bit loose. I'm just going to point that out. He does have some shoulder rotation. Will go up and down. He's got bicep swivel. He's got single jointed elbows, and then also some wrist rotation. The wrists, when you swap out the various hands, it just depends on which hand you're using. Some of them can be looser than others, especially in the joint, but they do rotate and they will go up and down. So just something to look at, and he does swivel at the elbow as well. This is about the extent of how you're going to get that up. It doesn't really go up any further, also because of his shoulder garment thing right there getting in the way. He does have some upper rotation to the diaphragm, and he also has a waist swivel. It's incredibly stuck. I did this before, but it is there. He'll kick out pretty much about that much, and it's also because this is like a harder plastic. This is a harder plastic right there. So that's pretty much the extent of how his leg is going to go up. He does have thigh swivel, double jointed knees, but because this gets in the way, you can turn it to the side. There you go. And that way it'll do that. He'll have some boot rotation right there. And then kind of sort of some ankle rotation. It'll go up and down. The paint is incredibly stuck right there, unfortunately. And he does swivel to the side. So it's there. You're just going to kind of mess up a little bit of the paint, just FYI. Overall, and I mean, I really like the back of the figure. The figure, for the most part, and the weapons, for the most part, are painted really nicely. It does have some splotches, some odd end things here and there, but that's a really good likeness, I think, for Trevor. I like everything that's going on, but the figure, I mean, let's be honest, the figure has some weird, wonky stuff going on with it. Now, Trevor does clock in at just above the 7-inch mark, and here he is lined up with a couple other companies, brands, and figures. If you are a 6-inch collector, I don't necessarily think that you're going to gravitate towards this guy. He might be a little bit too big for most of the figures that you have, but for those of you that do collect NECA, McFarlane, things like that, he will scale rather nicely, and he is very eye-catching. If you have a Nintendo shelf, video game shelf, something like that, I think that he will fit in really nicely, and for that, I can really appreciate that. This guy, when he was announced, I was like, bang, he's going on my Nintendo shelf with Mario and all the other characters. That being said, there is a huge problem with this figure, because as many hands as you get, as many weapons as you get, unless you make those alterations to those weapon-holding hands, the figure becomes obsolete. It doesn't do anything. And the weapons is the main part of Castlevania. You want your figure to hold its weapons. It doesn't detract from saying that the sculpt is great. The paint is fairly decent. But for those that are the casual action figure collector or just the casual fan of Castlevania and don't really know, I mean, a lot of people are going to open these things and go, wait a minute, there's no hands to hold the weapons. The belt loop's a little bit odd. There's really nothing to put there. His shawl was missing from the press photos. So going forward, I would ask Diamond Select to double check, recheck these things, because this figure, I can't honestly recommend it unless you are the action figure collector that is prepared to make these alterations. The figure basically doesn't work. The sculpt is great. The weapons I love. You get so many hands and everything else, but you really can't do anything with it unless you're prepared to fix it, essentially. If you're a big fan of Articulation, this figure is definitely also not going to be for you. He's just basically eye candy on your shelf. Again, if you have a video game shelf, something like that, I think he's going to look great. But I can't recommend it. But I will say thank you to Diamond Select for sending this guy over to give you guys this fresh look. And I will say this, one saving grace, one huge saving grace for this figure is that he comes with a bucket, and you can put the bucket on top of his head. I think that that's really awesome. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. As always, drink some great coffee, eat some great food. But most importantly, remember, no matter how many times you stop Dracula, he's going to be back. Come on, you should know that by now. And when you do, let me know what you found. I'll talk to you guys soon. Adios.